Right, hello. We should be live pretty soon. Let's have a look here. Okay. Classic live stream live. There we are. Hello, welcome to Hallandsåsen in southern Sweden on let's see the date here, March the 20th, 2019. This is a trailer for a live stream which will be going out tomorrow evening, 7:30 p.m. UK time, which will be a dialogue between myself, Roger Lewis, and with John Hearn, who's a lecturer in banking, economics and finance in London. Now, I've done a blog which sets out the terms of our dialogue, which has been provoked by this blog which John put out on March the 17th, entitled Free Market Capitalism, It's Their Future. By there I assume he's referring to his children and grandchildren. This is in this picture here, I'm guessing. Right, so I was asked if I had a brilliant idea for 21st century economics, and I replied that it is all on my blog. Well, here's John's blog, but pressed further. He was asked to sort of bumper sticker that all into 1,000 words, which follow here. So just John's blog, it's here, jbhearn.wordpress.com. John also did a video of a lecture that he did a month or two back, and I must find that actually and have a look at it, because it touches on many of the same issues, of which I am personally critical and disagree with. Now, here we are. Here's September 28th, 2018. Debt-fueled crises are always caused by government and never ever by private debt. A critique of the quantity theory of credit. That critiques some work of Professor Richard Werner, and I think the critique falls well short of its target. And in fact, if we just have a look at that, Richard Werner on one point wrapping up, touching on money, at the end here, where John says money is what is immediately available to use in a transaction, and Richard replies Forrest Gump's definition of money, which I must admit I think is really rather amusing. So just getting back here to the homepage of John's blog, and you can scroll through it. Quantity theory of money for Keynesians, Brexit and beyond. There's loads of stuff in there. I mean, dive in and fill your boots. So what I did was I copied John's article, that blog we're just referring to, and what I did was I placed it into a word tag, and you can look at this yourself. And government features the most of all. It's mentioned 12 times, followed by economy and education. I'm quite fond of it's textual analysis in just raw word counts. You get an idea of what a main theme of a piece of writing is, keywords as it were, and then you can look at the context within which those keywords are used. Now, curiously, John mentions banks only twice. This is words that appear more than 3 times, so bank doesn't appear in this cloud, but it is mentioned twice, both times in the context of the Bank of England or central banks, which is quite telling as we get through John's brilliant idea paper. So the title of the blog and the stream, Free Market Capitalism, It's Their Future. I had a brilliant idea for 21st Century Economics, a live stream dialogue on money, banking and political economy. TINA, the village bike or temple whore. Now, TINA stands for there is no alternative, and it's a mantra of neoliberalism, which is a school of political thought, and it's referring to TINA in a corporeal sort of personified sense, and I'm sort of saying, is it sort of just the village bike, or perhaps some temple whore which is worthy of some sort of worship? I tend more to sort of the hackneyed old village dartboard, frankly, and then there's this temple whore plaque from Babylonia, and a quote from a paper about that, which isn't just gratuitous sort of sexiness or anything. What it is obviously in Babylon they had a system of distribution, a system of exchange, and in the cuneiform text there are is evidence that in very earliest law codes, for matters of damages for personal injury or killing, compensation would be payable in equivalent measures of grain or cattle, and so systems of commerce are pretty old, and I'm interested to know whether or not John considers those to be capitalistic systems or something else. When he makes statements about capitalism and that it is the only thing, there is no alternative to capitalism. Well, one, what is capitalism, and two, over which period of time do you make your claim that nothing has been found that is better than capitalism? And I think it's fairly easy to show demonstrably that there have been different brands of capitalism even in the last, in the 300 years that I say that we've had industrial capitalism. In those 300 years there have been different forms and ways of trying it, and some have been better for more people than others, and so of course it's a legitimate question. Better for who? Whose perspective are we looking at? And so again, when generalizations are made such that they're made in John's essay, it's only 1,000 words, so of course it's going to be a bumper sticker, but at the same time these are arguments that John makes at length in other places, not least on his own blog, and therefore some of these truth claims are, in my view, faith-based, not supportable by the facts and evidence which is available in abundance. and that is something that we want to talk about. So the exchange of emails we've had this morning are here. Just as a sidebar on this, Ricky Newins, who I've been corresponding with since I think it's around 2011 on LinkedIn, raised the question about the single land tax and whether I'd like to discuss that with Ricky, and I've said yes, I would. And in the email exchange that crops up now and again. Trying to get a three-way header on Skype, I think, would be too much for my broadband connection, but I think there's live commenting available, and so that's something that we can do for another day or whatever. I mean, John Hearn expressed an interest in joining in a discussion on that on that question as well. So these are the email exchanges. There's Forrest Gump and his box of chocolates, and this here is a link to a video called Fixing Money, and it's a compilation of a few different videos with some cuts at the beginning and the end from The Big Short, the film, Brad Pitt and whatever. It's a great film about the global financial crash, which was caused by banks and bankers and banking and greed, and not by big government, etc., and so forth. John may disagree with that, and it's something that we may choose to sort of actually dig into and have a look at when we dialogue on these things tomorrow. Then I explain how the crowd tag is generated, and go on to write a blog which takes the truth claims and places them into headings with some definitions. Like John states that government should be focused on buying the public good, supporting the merit good, and discouraging the demerit good. Well, so there's some definitions of that there. Then he says that the central bank should have just one job, a target of 2% inflation. That the Treasury, which is part of the small government, should balance the government's budget, and that everything else should be left to private enterprise and firms. He touches on consumers and workers, kind of talking about employment levels being high, and there's long-term stability because the invisible hand has, done everything else because big government's got out of the way. I mean, I'm no fan of big government, don't get me wrong, but I'm also no fan of big corporations, and certainly not big banking corporations. So then he touches on foreign trade, where he's saying the balance of payments somehow miraculously is close to a zero balance on the current account, and currency and foreign exchange rates somehow are miraculously all absolutely hunky-dory as well. He doesn't explain how, and again, that's something which I think is a legitimate question to ask. So then I take from the top that's the generalised sort of overall proposition that John makes regarding his brilliant idea, and then I take it from the top and go through it paragraph by paragraph and add in some observations, questions, which I plan to do some more work on today, so I can send John a list of what evidence and arguments I would make to actually show that there are other ways of skinning the cat than proposed, which are supportable by evidence, and it's fair to assume that they're likely to lead to different and, by some people's measure or some people's opinion, better outcomes. So this one made me laugh. What it was that worked in the past, and rather than lose it, think about how it can be improved upon for the future. Kind of turn that on their head. We could look at what hasn't worked in the past and look at what wasn't tried and maybe try that. It's not just being pedantic. It's just that by stating arguments which appear only to suggest that there's one way, or this Tina thing, does leave one open to being absurd. And that was my reaction to reading John's thing, was that it was comedy gold in an absurdist sense, simply because it is so naive. And when I put that to John, he did say, well, of course, you know, it's good to be naive because that explains how things are, and these are complicated things. Explain complicated things to simple people in simple terms. And my answer to that is well, no, it's naive and magical thinking, and that's a different thing to separating out core principles and giving them a context, and being honest about different contexts that do exist, and actually setting out the boundary conditions over which your claims of economic truths will endure. So you know, that sort of thing, you know, is important. So, and then it goes on. I mean, I've mentioned the period of time, the different eras in history. What have the Romans ever done for us? This is the public good, and all of this sort of thing. Now, there's another blog on my site. I'll show you in a minute. There are two things I want to refer to. Tetlock, who we get to, which is the thing about experts, and how outcomes just never make any difference. And then the other thing was that this idea of what have the Romans ever done for us. So, I mean, there are lots of ideas in that short couple of paragraphs, and it's this glorious mishmash. Like, for instance, asymmetry in private contracts. Well, that's an interesting. That's uneven negotiating positions, and therefore evening up coercive power in a way. But I don't read John as any sort of libertarian that's interested in you know, self-ownership and the non-aggression principle, for instance. I don't get a lot of that from reading John's stuff. But the asymmetry in market information is something which Nicholas Taleb has written a lot about, and it's very, very important. It's about having skin in the game, and the unmentioned taboo through John's thing is the complete absence of the mention of creation of money, and who creates it, who has first use of it, who and how is it indexed. That none of that is discussed, and John discusses it very rarely. But he does say in this paper, and so it's a question I really want to ask: is who have you got creating this money? Um, you know, how does that work? And what are they? What criteria are they actually bringing the money into being for, and for whose benefits? Because when we talk about things like the public good or buying the public good, there are things like natural monopolies, which is a concept that exists. A natural monopoly could be something like the air that we breathe. Other people would argue it's things like a railway network or an electricity network. And I would argue that the creation of money belongs in a commons. I'm into open source programming and free software. And that's not free as in free beer, it's free as in non-proprietary, whereby the code is accessible to, readable by, and adjustable by, as long as there's attribution, anyone, so that if there's something in software which one feels is an infringement of one's privacy, or it's done in a way that doesn't maximize one's own system, as it were, that you can change it. And in a proprietary system, i.e. Software which is non-free, that isn't possible to do. Now, the idea of the commons, the enclosure of the commons, going back to Marx and his theory of money, most people that have been through any sort of recent education system will have no idea about what the enclosures are, in any sort of meaningful sense. In my opinion. So anyway, which period of capitalism, etc., the public good, what have the Romans done for us? These budget constraints, balancing budgets, election cycle. I've said, you know, so we're accorded elections, we're allowed elections, thanks John. But my question is, who votes and on what issues? Because you postulate this international court, and you know how governments have to have, you know, outside very limited regulations, should just keep well away. And I've said, you know, what are the terms of office, i.e. how long are people appointed for, what are accounting periods, you know, why 3 years, and more importantly, well, very importantly, where is the money coming from? And there's this claim here, to improve the economy's efficiency, the tax system needs to be revised. Well, okay, and then it goes on to say there'll only be VAT, and then there'll be a kind of indulgence tax for indulgences were something which the Catholic Church used to sell, which are similar to carbon trading credits, really, as pointed out by a guy called Clive Spash recently. Clive Spash is the other guy, as well as Tetlock, that I just want to show you how to have a look at on the blog here. Then there's this generalised thing here about what rates of income tax and all the rest of it. I mean, these are very sort of micromanaged ideas. Where do these numbers come from? There's some general stuff. I mean, one of the things I say is on this question is he proposes a universal basic income. So why not a job guarantee? I mean, as it happens, I think universal basic income is a good idea, and job guarantee with artificial intelligence, robotics, and all the rest of it is a harder thing to put in place. MMT, modern monetary theory people, they advocate for a job guarantee, and I perfectly understand why they argue for that. Universal basic income comes from another place, and there's some people that don't like either idea. Perhaps John is one of those. These are all valid positions, but they're all positions that exist and could work, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be applied in different regional areas, whether at a national level, at a city level, or at an international sort of global level. That's the other it's an interesting point, but unless these sorts of contexts are brought out, such a simplified worldview based on a there is no alternative argument falls into absurdity pretty quickly. So that's my view there. So moving along, I say, is this the brilliant idea? This will require quantity of money management on their behalf. That bit there, which I've done in red and underlined, you'll find that in John's essay. That's in fact the spelling mistake. Will be in the article, because that's just straight cut and paste. Who issues the money, and is it debt or credit? If it is either debt or credit, against which assets will it be secured? Any assets, if at all? And I like Proudhon's idea of issuing money as credit with no interest, which will lead to a general liquidation of the rentier economy, and Georgism and the single land tax, whereby if you're not using it, if it's not being put to work by your own hand, then hoarding beyond that is simply not supportable. And it would be possible to define a boundary condition for that, but anyone that thinks that billionaires are billionaires based on the sweat of their own brow is either an idiot or works for a billionaire, in my opinion. So there you have it. And then we get John sort of giving us the benefit of his experience, telling us that grammar schools really aren't the thing, and you know, what we're allowed to have in terms of the National Health Service, and a monopsonistic buyer of pharmaceutical products. Again, as an opinion, absolutely fine. As a brilliant economic idea, I don't think so. The comment I made there is instead of economics, because John's throwing them all out of work because you know, they're not needed anymore because they're not going to be micromanaging. And but I think we end up with management consultants instead. Then there's this playlist here. I made this video documentary series with Roy Madron, who wrote Guy on Democracies, which came out in about 2003, with a guy called John Joplin, which is on the Schumacher Press. And Schumacher is the guy that wrote Small is Beautiful, and also wrote a book, I think it's called Capitalism, A Guide for the Perplexed, or something like that, which is a wordplay or a pun on Maimonides' Guide for the Perplexed. Now, that's a really good interview. It's well worth watching. That's an interview that Roy did in 2003 on radio, which I put a slideshow over, and then there are two others about his most recent book, which is called Super Competent Democracies. And of course, the point about money in the economy and political economy is that the interests of the people in terms of non-economic man are very important. Defining the only possible opinion that people can have in terms of political economy is related to man as consumer or man uh, as worker really is not good enough in my opinion, because what is also important is the human engagement in society as a stakeholder outside of the commercial aspects of life, which do exist, are important, but so are art, so are literature, and so are having fun, so are leisure, and those aspects are something which are not able to be monetized in a way which suits a financialized economy and the model of the economy that John seems to think is the best way of going forward. And I've no doubt that it's the best way of going forward for bankers, John. That's who I think your ideal of a brilliant 21st idea economics is tailored for, and I say no. Actually, this should be for the broader polity, that is, all of the people within the wider context of society, from local level through to international levels, and there's a democratic concept of subsidiarity, which is that all decisions that can be taken at as local a level as possible, right down to individual decisions for individual outcomes, and then what is delegated up to more centralised bodies are things to do with those things that concern a wider number of people. And this, I argue, is an important point which John's article on the 21st century brilliant idea for economics just simply doesn't address. So my brilliant idea, if you like, for 21st century economics is, how about we do economics as if people, as human beings that feel, love, enjoy, and laugh, matter. So that's my brilliant 21st century idea. Let's do economics as if people really matter. So just on the blog here, so that people can look at some of these ideas, if you click those three bars there and go to search, I mentioned Clive Spash. If you put in Spash in the bar and press return, where are we? Here we go. And here we go. Greenwashing, green marches, all kind of green. Here we are, between the lines, open there. Now, this is a very good paper which is worth reading. Clive Spash is, he read land economy at Cambridge. I myself am a land economist. I'm a chartered surveyor. And a valuer like Clive, so I'm what they call a trained valuer, if you like, and I'm actually a member of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors for my sins. And anyway, this guy wrote a paper on carbon emissions trading, and it's very much worth reading. It's called Brave New World, paper from 2010. Here's Clive lecturing, and I only found out about him because he's mentioned by this guy here, this Dr. Art Ritchie, who was the chief researcher at CRIRO, which is the Australian environmental thing, like the EPA in the States. And he mentions Clive Spash basically being censored on this carbon trading paper, and I've found his work absolutely amazing. That's a fairly recent discovery for me, Clive Spash's work, which I must say is very well buried on the internet, as is a lot of all this other political economy stuff. And then the other guy who I just wanted to mention quickly as well, there we go. That was Clive Spash, Tetlock. So Tetlock, here you go, put that in there. And this one here. Okay, so Tetlock makes an appearance in this blog here, which I wrote in January 2017, called Red Line Settled Science, The End of History, and entitled Facts, If Truth Were Subject to Patent Law, which goes through quite a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, you can read that if you want to, if you've got time. But actually, right, now this is a Chrome browser. If you click these three dots on Chrome browser and then press find, you can search a document for words. So this is Tetlock. So if I do that, and then you see, right, if it were easy to set standards for judging judgment that would be honoured across the opinion spectrum and not glibly dismissed as another sneaky effort to seize the high ground for a favourite cause, someone would have patented the process long ago. If we want realistic odds on what will happen next, coupled to a willingness to admit mistakes, we're better off turning to experts who embody the intellectual traits of Isaiah Berlin's prototypical fox, those who know many little things, draw from an eclectic array of traditions, and accept ambiguity and contradiction as inevitable features of life. Than we are turning to Berlin's hedgehogs, those who know one big thing, toil devotedly with one tradition, and reach for formulaic solutions to ill-defined problems. QED there, but do take a look at some of the other links if you get a chance there. But this is the tyranny of specialisation. When I'm here, just on the tyranny of specialisation, let's just I've been writing a novel for the last 3 years called The Conquest of Doe, for which I've made its own multimedia site. And on the site, I can't remember which page it is. I know it's at the bottom of one of the pages. There's a... Right, it's not that page, I can see that much. This page is quite interesting. I mean, this is a book about money, so it's quite a good thing to look at, because it goes into the political economy of money and also the sort of history of how things come to pass. So here we are. To read a book is like all the other really human occupations, a utopian task. I call utopian every action whose initial intention cannot be fulfilled in the development of its activity, and which has to be satisfied with approximations essentially contradictory to the purpose which has started it. Those to read begins by signifying the project of understanding a text fully. Now this is impossible. It is only possible with a great effort to extract a more or less important portion of what the text has tried to say, communicate, make known, but there will always remain an illegible residue. It is, on the other hand, probable that while we're making this effort, we may read at the same time into the text. That is, we may understand things which the author has not meant to say, and nevertheless he has said them. He has presented them as involuntary, even more against his professed purpose. So that's an interesting thing. That's the grey space, or the, as Duchamp said, the regarder le tableau, the watcher makes the picture. And then here's the same guy, that was Oppenheim, quoting José Ortega Gasset in Letters from Mesopotamia, which is really worth reading. And then here we have another quote from Ortega Gasset, the barbarism of specialization. The specialist serves as a striking concrete example of the species, making clear to us the radical nature of the novelty. For previously men could be divided simply into the learned and the ignorant, those more or less the one and those more or less the other. But your specialist cannot be brought in under either of these two categories. He is not learned, for he is formally ignorant of all that does not enter into his speciality, but neither is he ignorant, because he is a scientist and knows very well his own tiny portion of the universe. We shall have to say that he is a learned ignoramus, which is a very serious matter, as it implies that he is a person who is ignorant, not in the fashion of the ignorant man, but with the petulance of one who is learnt in his own special line. And I think that's a very important lesson for all economists or all experts, frankly. Hey Rasmus, how you doing, mate?
Can you wait for me on the bus stop? Did you promise?
Yes,